All right, welcome to the Forever Forward podcast again. This is the host. I'm Damon Goddard. Appreciate you guys logging in, listening, following, all the nine with that. I appreciate you guys. And, listen, this is the platform for us to be able to, set the tempo and set the pace on, listen, these are weird times right now. And we have the opportunity to either let those external forces influence us, declining, or being able to use those external influences and rise to the occasion. And hopefully a lot of us are rising to the occasion right now, using a lot of the creativity that we have and, spending time with family, connecting with loved ones, but also just using this time to better ourselves, personally, professionally, whatever that may be. And so, this is the platform to be able to utilize some inspiration from some amazing folks. And just as a reminder, Forever Forward podcast is really, just like our little, slogan that we use is always keep moving forward. And that forever forward mindset is, whenever we're in the valley, what is that mindset to just keep me one step forward? And, it's in those little voids that a lot of times, and I tell my athletes a lot of this too, is listen, it just simply takes one step forward. You have those thresholds. And most of the time, it's just a mental threshold where it just, stops us in our tracks and go, man, I don't think I can go one step more. And so that's the idea is listen, all of us have experienced those hiccups and those valleys in life. But what was that, one step forward, that one step past that threshold that really started to expand our capacity, increase our capacity to do bigger things? And, I tell my athletes, listen, you don't need these grandiose steps. I'm not asking A to Z right now. All I want is A to B. And once you get to that B, let's get to C, let's get to D. And those little small incremental steps start really, pulling us forward and pushing us forward to grand things. And so increasing our capacity, we increase our power to do some really big things. So that's why I'm excited about today's guest, Mickey Nuttall. But before we introduce him, today's podcast and webcast, and we're all listening, on the Facebook Live or listening to the podcast right now. We're going to be talking about Pros. Pros is an amazing product. Is one of our sponsors for this particular episode. They use a lot of the synergistic hemp formulations used in essential oils and plant extracts, vitamins, minerals, herbs, spices. Everything is very synergistic in order to really enhance the ability to help the system and the body. I mean, listen, we're dealing with stress, we're dealing with, lack of sleep, we're dealing with a lot of things, a lot of inflammation, that's in the gut. And so now we have the opportunity to, breathe a little bit, but also use some products that may help us. And so, in light of Mother's Day coming up on Sunday, I want to wish everyone that's listening to this happy Mother's Day. To my mom in particular, happy Mother's Day. I love you, Mom. And so what we're going to do is we're going to offer you guys 30% off a product, but we also have the opportunity to send a product. So listen, mama is tired. Mama is stressed. She's dealing with kids or she's dealing with you. Goodness gracious, let's help her out. So 30% off product. We're also going to be able to send free product to her as well. Go to pros.com, PROZE.com. At checkout, we have a special code for you guys. Just use Goddard, GODDARD, and you'll be able to get that 30% off and be able to help mama out a little bit. And so, once again, pros.com, PROZE.com. So today, let's talk about Mickey Nuttall. Mickey Nuttall is an amazing character. I love the texture that he has with his life. It's one of those things where you have to see it. I'm going to talk about it, but we're going to see it here. Let me just show you a little quick video of some of the fun stuff that Mickey does, casually. And so, so this particular video, let's just do this on a casual evening. Let's put some flames on our feet. Let's get our buddies together. Let's create a little formation. Just another casual day, a little ho-hum day for Mickey. This is just something that it's probably old hat to him for sure. But, Mickey is a world record skydiver. You can see this pic right here was the opportunity to set a world record. And then once again, this is why I'm excited to talk with Mickey today. Is he literally jumps in valleys face first and goes screaming into valleys, but he harnesses the power of going into those valleys and uses it to his advantage to create some really cool things. So Mickey, with being a world skydiver or world record skydiver, he's got U.S. national gold medals. He's also a stunt skydiver. Just some amazing things that he's done. Some of the shows he's been on, CSI, he's been on The Unit. He's been on movies like Ant-Man and Iron Man 3. He was stunt double for Will Smith on the Kids' Choice Award. I mean, this guy's just done literally everything from the span of his entire career. So let me introduce you to Mickey here. Mickey, I appreciate you coming on and joining us on the Forever Forward podcast today.
Oh, thanks for having me, Damon. Your introduction is overblown, man. You make me sound way more cool than I am.
Nah, listen. You're one of the coolest cats I've ever met, man. So, as a matter of fact, even yesterday I'm showing the boys, the videos of the skydiving with the flames on the feet, and they're just like in awe of everything that you do. So, I appreciate you being on, and I'm looking forward to just kind of diving in a little bit on, gee whiz, man, your entire journey. And it's been an interesting journey for you, for sure. The span of your career has morphed into a lot of different things, but even more so that, let's kind of go off the jumping point of just where everything started. You were born in Alamogordo, New Mexico, which is, if anyone's listening from Alamogordo.
Where is that?
Exactly. Where in the world is Alamogordo? Just think South New Mexico. And just a blip on the radar. Maybe some people have been over to White Sands, which is a really cool spot, Alamogordo. And really interesting about Mickey is, Mickey was adopted by an older couple, right, and an older white couple at that. And it's really, to me, there's a few things going on just right off the bat. Is you're in Alamogordo, New Mexico. You're with, being adopted by a white couple in a majority, white city. And so, let's use that as a jumping point, as going, okay, what was that like to begin with?
Sure. I was adopted when I was 2 days old. And in my family, I never felt different. Mm-hmm. I was accepted and loved, unconditional love from both my parents, your mom, my sister, mm-hmm. my brothers. I was so well accepted, and I don't think I really understood adoption until I started getting a little older. As a kid, mom and dad was mom and dad, and that's the way it was. Yeah. And so. Yeah, you talk about starting off like in a very different world and in different circumstances. I certainly had that, but I guess I wasn't hyper aware of the situation at the time. Yeah. Yeah. So, but as I grew older, I certainly grew a much more appreciation for what I was given and what I had, and just amazing opportunities in my life because of my mom and dad, and mm-hmm. Awesome people. Yeah. Crazy people. They, let me put this in perspective. You said, my parents were quite a bit older. They had already raised 4 children, and their youngest was, I think, a senior in high school when they adopted me. Yeah. So they had done their job, right? Yeah. Their kids were in college, they were successful, and they were raising foster children for several years, and just decided to adopt me. Yeah. I'm super lucky. I hit the lottery for sure. No,
and I'll bounce that back. Is actually we're lucky, to have you in the family. I think it's really interesting. Last week with Jeevers, we talked about different cultural experiences that he had. He grew up in Forest Hills, Michigan. And it was very interesting how his family, not necessarily, isolated themselves from everyone else. They simply didn't see the difference. And that's one of those things where growing up for me, and having you as an uncle, it was an amazing experience, because I think I took it really further on in life, is where I just didn't see color, man. I just saw, Uncle Mickey is just Uncle Mickey, man. And it's one of those, things in life where I appreciated just you being you. And, I think it helped me facilitate relationships with a lot of different cultures, a lot of different races, where I just didn't see the colors. I didn't see the race. I just saw the human being. And I love that. And I love that about our family as well, is it just wasn't a thing. And I wish more people would actually embrace that, for sure. Culturally, it's just, listen, man, people are people, and it doesn't matter. And,
Absolutely.
And I love that. So here's some memories that I have, growing up.
Oh boy. Hold on. Should we censor this?
No. Listen, this is uncensored. And trust me, I'm not going to show the pictures or anything. But, as a child, I loved always, coming over to the house and Uncle Mickey, went through some pretty amazing phases. And I think this was a real awesome foundation for what you got into. I mean, I think at one point you're golly, in motocross. At one point, I remember going over and watching bull ride. To boot, you're bull riding with an amazing Tina Turner haircut. I loved that. But
that was a little later, but yes.
Okay.
It's all true things.
But you did rock it, and listen, I have my hairdo phases right now as well. Currently, this is
Corona cut.
Corona cut.
Good.
Yeah, thank you.
You're getting a little bit of gray in there too, buddy.
A little bit. Oh,
can't believe my nephew is getting gray.
That's called it's called having two children. So let's talk about you did a lot of the motocross. You did the bull riding. What was that thirst for? Golly, I'll call it an adrenaline rush, or I don't know what it was, but what was that drove you to those type of experiences?
Man, that's a really good question, Damon. I begged my parents to buy me a motorcycle when I was 8 years old, and they finally gave in about a year later. And of course, my first day on a motorcycle, I had been scoping out this jump in the desert that I had ridden on my BMX bike a lot, and I didn't have that motorcycle for 10 minutes, and I drove straight to the jump, and I went flying off it way faster than I thought I was going. And, in my head, I was, 100 feet in the air and landed this thing, and I got off of it, and I was like, oh my God, what did I just do? And broke the forks immediately.
Oh, no.
Brand new motorcycle, broke the forks. And I guess it's always been in me, As you know, we had a swimming pool growing up, and, I was always the first one to jump off the roof into the pool, or I was always, that kid that I loved that. I don't know if that's an innate thing or if I learned that through friendships, the other kids, pushing each other.
Right.
But it's always been with me for sure.
Yeah.
Like you said, I rode bulls for a while. I was in 4-H when I was younger and raised 2 sheep. Sure you probably remember.
I remember those sheep, actually. Yeah.
Yeah. And, I went through a lot of phases, rode bulls, like I said, was into skateboarding and, busted myself up on skate ramps. And it's a good question. I'm sorry, I don't have a better answer. I don't know.
No.
Like if I was born with it or if it was a learned thing, but.
No, for sure. I mean, as a matter of fact, seeing you skateboarded catalyzed my whole journey into skateboarding as well. And, I thought of myself a little bit too much on the skateboarding side, and I did half pipes and quarter pipes. I did street, and it was funny is I hadn't skateboarded in forever, and now having 2 boys, I've started to skateboard again, and man,
teaching them,
and it's amazing, but it's kind of like the whole bike scenario is like you just never learn, lose the ability to do it. And I remember seeing you, and I think that catalyzed this big push for me to really kind of jump into the skateboarding world. And so
something about like what causes that like need for speed or that adrenaline rush. I think my parents had a lot to do with it because they encouraged every single thing that I did.
Nice.
They never said no. Like if I wanted to play sports, they said, do it. When I wanted to play baseball, my dad was in the front yard throwing the ball with me until my arm just stopped, and they always encouraged all the activities that I did. So I think that had a lot to do with it.
Yeah, I think, listen, both of us are parents, and I can see that in myself as well with my two boys is, we want to protect them so much, and we want to kind of isolate them. And, our biggest thing is we just don't want to see our kids get hurt, right? But at the same time, there's something inside me that goes, listen, you were doing the exact same things when you were their age, and, the experiences that they can have and the texture that they can have through a skinned knee. And, they think it's awesome when they see a little blood on their knee. They think it's awesome when they, spill. And I think that actually teaches us something later on in life where it's like, we can be really inhibited by fear of the unknown. Or we can, meet it head on and go, I need to try this, and it may backfire, but we always talk about motivation, and to me, motivation is action. It's just not this innate weird feel. Motivation is action, and so when we have something that really is drawing us to it, I think there's a moment where we have to decide, I need to move on this. And as a kid, we just feel so uninhibited, if you will, about I'm just going to try stuff, and everything is brand new. And especially when there's a little taste of like, ooh, that was really kind of cool. That was a big jump.
That was fun.
It was fun, right? And so I think from a parenting standpoint, I think if we let loosen up the reins a little bit with some of our kids, I think we can really start to see them, grow into themselves of going, I have confidence that I can do big things, right? It's, once again, it's talking about, just taking that one step and growing in their capacity to go, I can do that, right? So that's really cool that Grandma and Grandpa, really encouraged that. And I can definitely see both of them encouraging.
Yeah. I'm pretty sure I gave them most of their gray hair, but they supported it nonetheless.
No doubt. So let's talk about the skydiving stuff, man. When was the first time that you went, okay, I need to just jump out of a plane and just, careen towards the ground, and then hopefully this parachute, helps me a little bit. What was that first experience for you?
Sure, that was 28 years ago, so we're going back a little ways. I saw skydiving in movies, and I saw it on television, and I always thought, man, that would be really cool. And what kid doesn't grow up thinking, man, I had a dream last night that I could fly, and I wish I could fly. And I remember growing up thinking, I wish I could fly. And I met a guy that I worked at Intel in Rio Rancho, New Mexico, and we ended up working on a project together, and I saw some pictures on, we had cubicles back then, and saw some pictures on his cubicle of skydiving. And I was like, man, I've always wanted to do that. And he said, man, you should do it. And I said, you know what, I'm going to.
Yeah.
And the next day, he left a Post-it note on my chair in my cubicle with a receipt. And it said, I'll see you at the drop zone on Saturday. You need to be at Holiday Inn on Friday night at 7 p.m. You're going to take your first jump course.
Nice.
And it was like, put up or shut up, let's go.
Yeah, you're doing this.
And, I went out there, and it wasn't the experience that I thought it was going to be. Back then, we did what's called static line jumps. Okay. So kind of like a military jump. You jump from an airplane, and the static line pulls your parachute for you.
Yeah.
And it was really cool. I immediately was like, oh my God, that was amazing. Mm-hmm. I'd never experienced anything like that in my life. And, but it wasn't what I visualized. I visualized the free fall part, of course.
Yeah.
Expectation versus reality.
Right.
And so I learned that I had to do a certain amount of those static line jumps before I was able to get to the free fall part. So I kind of got sucked in like that. So I got to the free fall part, and by then there was no turning back, man. Not just the sport itself, but the people of the sport. I truly found my clan of people that I resonated with and that I just really gelled with, and fell in love with the sport. I fell in love with the people. I fell in love with everything about it.
Yeah.
And that obviously turned into a lot more than just, oh, this is fun. Let me jump out of an airplane because it's really fun. You know, you start setting goals and, man, I want to be able to jump with other people. And then you jump with other people. And then you want to, you know, we come from an extremely competitive family. You know, there's a bunch of overachievers in our family, and, you know, a couple doctors and, back in their day, outstanding sports athletes.
Right.
And so I think we're all pretty competitive, and that's what kind of drove me into the competition side of skydiving.
Yeah.
And that's, I guess, in a nutshell.
Yeah. I can imagine it. You know, I've always talked smack about actually doing it, and the only person that I will actually trust in this planet is, you know, one of the best in the world at doing it. So at some point we'll have a video of me strapped on your back, or where I can.
Well, we do have video of you in a wind tunnel.
Ah, that's right. Yes,
we should have put that on the cast here, because that was good stuff.
That's right. The wind tunnel was a blast, actually.
You were a natural too. You did really well.
No, that was a blast. So let's fast track now. You know, so, you know, from the beginning of that, with, you know, where are we now with the skydiving? What are you doing now?
You know, now it's back to a hobby. It started as a hobby, and then it became. You know, I got involved in competition, and then it became a job. I started doing tandem jumps and what's called AFF jumps, and it became a job. And then when I kind of ended my serious competition days back in 2012, it became a hobby again. And that's where I'm at now. The video that you showed of the night jump with the pyro and all that stuff, like, man, I live for those moments now, because now it's just fun, and, you know, no sponsors now. I don't have to answer to anybody. It's just, I still love it, man. I'm still super passionate about it. Yeah. I can't imagine not doing it, to be honest. And that sounds silly saying it, you know, people that don't are like, why would you? I don't get it. And that's okay. You don't have to get it. Right. But I love it.
No, that's awesome. So, you know, when we're, you know, talking about that evolution from the beginning to now, you know, finding the pure joy behind it, you know, there's a whole lot of things that are in between that, right? From the, you know, competitions to having the drive to go, man, I need to, you know, set a world record, right? Or I need to win a gold, you know, or I want to be able to, you know, morph my career into being able to, you know, do some stunt stuff as well. You know, it's really interesting that in between time, when it becomes almost like a little business, and you know, did you find yourself in the midst of the competition? You know, let's go with some of the U.S. nationals, right? You know, did you find yourself in those U.S. nationals enjoying it?
You know, I did. My first big competition was actually an indoor skydiving competition. It was a wind tunnel competition. Nice, yeah. And my teammate and I had trained really, really, really hard for this. Yeah. Because a U.S. team had never won it at that time. And so we go to Europe, and we're in this competition against we're up against this team that had won it the last 2 years. And I remember the night before, I didn't sleep at all. And my teammate was just cool as a cucumber, just cold as ice. Yeah. And he's like, you know, we're in the same room, and he's snoring immediately. And I got up, and I was like, man, I just resigned to thinking I'm going to sleep tonight because I'm too nervous, you know. Right. And I walked around for a while, and halfway through the competition, we were doing really well. It was between us and the team that had continued to win year after year. And I remember going into the bathroom, and I was sick. I was so overwhelmed with nerves and fear. And I remember looking in the mirror and going, there's no other time, there's no other thing that can make me feel this way. Yeah. Right? Yeah. Like those competition jitters, like, you can't simulate that. As hard as we try when we're training, you know, and practice, whether it's a traditional sport or whatever you're doing, you can practice as hard as you can. But when it comes time for competition, you can't replicate that feeling. Yeah. And I just remember going, man, this is awesome. Yeah. I love this. And I kind of got addicted to that, and I fell in love with that. And that just continued. You know, you talked about the world records and the stunts. Like, I didn't start skydiving with that in mind. It just naturally progressed into that, you know?
Yeah.
It was a natural progression, and yeah.
Well, it's funny is, you know, a lot of times when we do meet that competition, and then, you know, I remember, you know, that was my one thing before games. I just, you know, I would naturally be able to do it and do it well, but for some reason, pregame, I would always yak. And I'm like, what in the world is going on, man? I know. But it's funny is
there's a whole lot going inside.
There's a whole lot going inside, but what people don't, you know, really realize, even Mike Tyson pukes before, you know, all of his boxing matches, and you know, it's one of those things where we don't realize, you know, heroes and cowards, you know, they have the same type of fear of that particular competition. It's a matter of who is just going to be able to harness that, right? And you know, it's one of those things where, you know, we always feel like either, you know, we're embarrassed behind it, or we're like, oh man, I'm fully fear and my stomach is actually gonna turn inside out. But then once it becomes competition time, there's this weird mode that gets switched, and you're just in that zone, and then all of a sudden, you know, that fear can actually be harnessed, and now you have the ability.
Time seems to slow down when that happens, right? Like when you're in that moment, it's indescribable for me, and yeah, really cool stuff.
That's awesome. Let's talk a little bit about the world record when you did all that. You know, talk to me about the logistics, and you know, tell the listeners a little bit about what that was, and you know, kind of the whole background behind that.
Sure. Yeah, a lot goes into that behind the scenes. There's, you know, the support network of people that have to contribute to make that happen is more phenomenal to me than the record itself. But we start with tryouts. You know, we make sure that people are up for that task. Yeah. You're putting over 100 people in the air at the same time together, and you know, you're moving pretty fast. The head down orientation world records are moving at 190 miles an hour.
Whoa.
So, you know, you don't want to just say, you know, I heard you're good enough to do this. So you have tryouts for it. You know, it's highly planned. You stamp it out on a piece of paper first. You know, have the people show up early and start in smaller groups to practice up for it. You kind of start getting an idea of who can go where and who's capable of doing what,
right.
Or if they're not capable. And you walk it out on the ground. It's called dirt diving. You know, you practice it over and over and over on the ground. It's a rehearsal, you know, and dress rehearsal, if you will. And then you put it in the air, and it never builds on the first one. And, you know, you get up there, and you know, it's with all the planes that it takes to lift that amount of people. It's a huge reset. So you've got to pack your parachute. Mm-hmm. You've got to go to the auditorium and watch what you just did on video and debrief it and pick it apart and say, okay, excuse me, this is where it went wrong, or these are the things that we need to clean up in order to make this successful. They've got to refill the oxygen bottles. They've got to make sure the planes are fueled. There's a whole lot going on.
Yeah.
And, you know, you get one shot. It's about 60 seconds of, here we go, here's our shot again, and it still doesn't work. And you start that process over. And that's kind of how.
Yeah, that's I can't imagine the logistics behind that, and the planning and whatnot. But you know, one of the things that we think about is, you know, all the external variables that influence even our particular plan. You know, we can, you know, have all of our dry runs, and we can have, you know, do our, you know, post jump, you know, reviews and all that. But, you know, one of those things where, you know, the external variables that come into play really can wreak havoc on a plan. And so those
weather comes into play, you know, and you talk about that, like, everybody, including myself in the beginning, pictures the end goal. You know, how awesome it's going to be to get this world record. Yeah. You know, you're going to be a part of history, and this is going to be something that is remembered forever. It's going to be in the books. And that's what you visualize the whole time. Right. And then you get there, and there's a lot of hard work, and it's hot. It's the summer, and you're sitting on the plane for an hour waiting for it to climb, and you know, you've got this heavy gear on, and you don't picture all that stuff.
No.
You know, and it makes it all worth the prize at the end if, you accomplish the goal.
Yeah, and how important that is to actually have that end goal in mind. And I think a lot of us do have our kind of end game or end result in mind. But some of those non-sexy moments where you're like, wow, I didn't realize it took this much planning, this much sweat, this much energy from me. And that's where a lot of people will kind of throw in the towel and go, man, I can't do this, right? And so, one of those powerful moments of going, okay, I want to, be able to set the world record, have the vision behind it, and know that's out there. But there's so many, steps that need to be taken in order to get to that point, right? And then all of a sudden, when there's, proper preparation, I remember my dad was always, the 5 P's, proper preparation prevents poor performance, right? And so, especially in skydiving, I mean, your margin for error is so small.
It's pretty small. Yeah.
And
the consequences can be fatal.
Yeah, no, 100%. And that's something that, I want to kind of allude to. I mean, there's a little bit of a, risk reward ratio to this thing. And I know that you've experienced, a lot of, losses of friends and losses of colleagues and teammates. And, talk me a little bit through the risk reward. It's one of those things where, outside in, you start to take a look at it and go, skydiving, man, all of us have, an occupation that we do. And hopefully, you're in an occupation that you absolutely love. Like what I do is absolutely amazing. And it gets me up in the morning to just wake up with full energy. And it's not humdrum to me. It's not, it just doesn't suck the energy out of me. It actually puts energy into me. So even with skydiving, the risk reward ratio, talk to me a little bit about some of those margins for errors and, some of those big losses that you've been able to, kind of grieve a little bit and understand that, yeah, this is going to happen. How did you handle a few of those?
Yeah. So, you've got to determine what your passion is. And of course there's risk in everything that we do. And with skydiving, I never focused on the risk so much. I always focused on the passion of it. Mm-hmm. And, I've always been that person that chooses to take that risk. If you don't climb the mountain, you're going to be stuck in the valley. And yeah. I don't want to be stuck in the valley. I don't want to be stuck on the ground. Yeah. And, we train really hard for it. And ultimately you have to trust the training that you've put into it. Mm-hmm. It's not like I just got a parachute and put it on and decided to go jump. There's right. a lot of training that goes into that. And there's a lot of progression to that skydiving to get to the world record skydives level, and by the time you get there, your confidence is pretty high and you trust your training, and that's what it comes down to. Yeah, no. So as far as losing people, it's never easy. And in my world, in base jumping and skydiving and the things that I do, we almost normalize it a little bit, which I think is a flaw. We shouldn't normalize death the way we do. And people say, oh man, he died doing what he loved. And I'm like, man, I don't want to die doing what I love. I want to die old in a bed all by myself, fall asleep, and then that's it. Yep. It's over. Yeah. And, like you said, I've lost a lot of friends, and it never gets easier. Some are certainly harder than others for whatever reason. Mm-hmm. It definitely makes you take a step back and reevaluate what you're doing, mm-hmm. And you have to make that decision ultimately. Is this worth it? Is this, is the risk worth the reward? Yeah. And for me, so far it has been. And when it's not, if I lose my passion or if I lose my thirst for that, then I won't do it anymore.
Yeah. With that particular loss, of a colleague and a teammate, did you ever, have a hesitation, after one of those losses going, oh man, this is kind of inhibiting my enthusiasm right now. Did that ever kind of creep into your head?
Sure.
when you're in the plane looking down going, oh my gosh, yeah, I just, a couple weeks ago mourned the loss of one of my buddies, but did that, become, front of the surface of going, man, I don't know if I need to do this, or, how did you process that?
Yeah, in the beginning it did with skydiving, and I got over that pretty fast. I mean, the numbers are in your favor. The only time you hear about somebody dying skydiving, or the only time you hear about skydiving is when somebody dies, typically, for most people, which is unfortunate. I mean, we make hundreds and hundreds of thousands of jumps a year as a community. And very few die doing it. I mean, your odds are better skydiving than they are in a car.
Yeah, no, 100%. Yeah.
With base jumping, it was a little different. I certainly, there's been several moments that I've taken a step back and said, man, this guy was the best in the world doing this, and he died doing it. He was certainly better than me, and I'm still doing it. And again, man, you can't turn off your passion for things, so I guess that outweighed, for me, the risk in what I'm doing. Having being a father certainly comes into play a lot. I think about my daughter anytime I'm doing something stupid, jumping off a cliff, or putting a wingsuit on or trying to fly away from a cliff. But again, you trust your training, and you stay confident in what you're doing, and so far so good.
Yeah, I think there you go, knock on wood. And I do think it's funny is, statistically speaking, you're more putting yourself in danger just driving down the highway to work than you are, skydiving. And it's funny how we start to categorize that thought process of going, all right, it's okay to jump into the car and go into traffic, but once we hear somebody losing their life doing skydiving and something, it's funny how we put those in buckets. We go, oh my gosh, I'm never going to skydive. Well, we start to think about it, we're like, I'm actually a little bit more in danger getting into the car, and
you don't think twice about getting back in that car, right? Everybody knows somebody typically that has either been mangled or killed in a car accident, and probably didn't even slow you down getting back in that car.
No, 100%. And I do think it's funny how we put those things in buckets mentally, and we put weight on one thing and put weight on another, but I think it has a tendency to get into our day-to-day of going, okay, I have this, issue, or I have this problem, or something is, giving me, a lot of stress. And, it's one of those things where, we always mentally will go back to, I remember my buddy, had the same scenario and it absolutely crushed that person. And, it's interesting how we start to put those in buckets, and, and so that's to me, it's time to kind of sit back and reflect on that and go, okay, why do I not get scared getting into the cars? Because now I can control a lot of the elements behind it. I can be a defensive driver. I can.
Man, doubt is normal.
Oh yeah.
Right. We all have doubt, and there's been times that I've had doubt, but letting that doubt stop you, man, that's a choice, 100%. And it's okay to choose to stop. Yeah. But that's not a choice I've made just yet.
No, I think that's good for everyone. So talk to me about base jumping. One of the little videos we had is with in the squirrel suit, and I mean that looks absolutely freaking awesome. What's the feeling like that? I mean, you're screaming by a mountain that's just like inches away from your face, and what's that feeling that you have where, and we can even kind of get behind the little physics behind what it takes to execute that type of jump or that type of performance. Talk to me a little bit about some of the physics behind it, or some of the elements that come behind it. What does it take to harness that type of energy?
Yeah, base jumping is an extreme progression from skydiving. I think 99.9999% of base jumpers started skydiving. Mm-hmm. And the thing about skydiving, so the physics behind skydiving, right? You're jumping out of a plane going 120 miles an hour-ish. Mm-hmm. And so you're already going that fast. So you don't really get that elevator, like falling feeling.
Right.
Right. Whereas base jumping, you're starting from zero. There's no wind speed. There's no speed whatsoever. And so you're feeling what gravity actually feels like.
Yeah.
And man, I'll never forget my first base jump. I went with my buddy Craig. He called me and said, "Hey man, do you want to go make a base jump?" And I had at the time 1,000 skydives, so I had the ability to land a parachute in a really small place, which is typically the case in base jumping. And I said, "Yeah, you know." And we it was a live copper mine in Arizona, and you know, highly illegal. So we had to go at night.
Right.
And
another element.
Another element, and you know, we had to rung up this ladder 1,000 feet, which was way harder than I thought it was going to be. So we finally get to the top, and I'm like, oh man, I'm just relieved that I made it up here, you know. And I remember climbing over the rail, and I was holding on to my buddy Craig's shoulder, and I looked at him and I said, man, I'm freaking out, and my legs were shaking so hard that I thought I was going to fall off. And he just smiled at me and said, "I know, you're good.
Yeah,
you got this."
Yeah.
And I was like, "Okay," and I jumped, and man, to describe that feeling, there's nothing I have done, not even skydiving, that compares to that feeling. And yeah, I don't want to say I was hooked, but that if there's an addiction to adrenaline, there's some addiction there.
Yeah.
But you know, every Thanksgiving I go on the space jumping trip with some of my closest friends, my buddies, and we go to Moab, Utah.
Oh, nice. And
just the experience, Damon, of the journey, you know, the hike up there, the hanging out with your friends, watching one of your friends jump off a cliff is not normal, and it's really cool. I mean, just watching someone jump is almost as cool as jumping yourself.
Yeah.
And it was a progression. You know, I didn't put a wingsuit on and jump off a cliff for the first time. I had a couple hundred base jumps before I did that, and yeah, I've been to events all over the world. You know, it's an excuse for me to go to different places in the world. I've been to Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia, Greece, you know, Norway, all over Europe, Switzerland, Italy. And, you know, the base jumping is the cherry on top. It's the excuse to go do all these things, hang out with your bros and spend this quality time together.
Yeah.
So.
How important is it to have that kind of crew that just goes, "Hey, listen, you got this, man"? I mean,
it's really important. You know, I don't think you would do it without them. I suppose some would, but you know, the guy that taught me how to base jump, again, I brought him up before, Craig. I remember the first time, you know, he always went last because he wanted to make sure my gear was good, and he wanted to make sure that I was good and ready to go. And we went to this place called Saguaro Lake in Arizona, and it was a cliff. And I said, "Hey, man, you go first this time." And he was like, "Okay, cool." And he went, and I was like, "Cool." And then I realized I was up there by myself, and I had nobody to high five, and I had nobody to just double check and tell me, "Hey, everything is going to be okay."
Right.
And I was like, "Man, would I be doing this if there was nobody watching?"
Right.
And I was like, I don't know. Like, am I doing this? Or, you know, you start asking yourself some hard questions. Am I doing this for myself, or am I doing this to impress somebody else?
Right.
And I jumped, and then the first time I jumped, I just went to the bridge and went by myself. And when I landed, I was like, I do it for myself. I do love this for what it is and not for my crew. But man, the crew makes all the difference. My buddies that I've traveled the world with and jumped off of cliffs with, there's a bond there that's shared that I don't think a lot of people understand or will ever grow to know.
Yeah.
But
no, I think, you know, that speaks volumes to have that, you know, kind of that support network of guys and girls that, you know, are your buds that go, "You know what, you got this, you can do this." And, you know, to be able to breathe life into a scenario where it's like, okay, I'm looking into this massive valley and I'm literally about to just let gravity do its thing. You know, I think it takes a particular set of brass cojones to be able to do that. But that set aside, I think having that innate, support mechanism of going, yeah, I've got my crew to be able to take me through this. But then even when you're on the solo side of it, you're going, okay, like you said, it's like, why am I doing this? Do I do it for just, someone's, slapping me on the back saying, I need some kind of affirmation to this, or do I actually, do this because I truly find joy behind it? And I think that's one of those things that may be lost with a lot of, times in life where we just lose the joy behind something. And I think a lot of us mistake things that make us happy or something that truly
Sure.
makes us feel joy. I think those are two completely different things. Is that they can be intertwined, but I think when you find the true joy of doing something, I think that innate self inspiration to kind of go, what, I got this. And I think that's super powerful. We've got
Sure.
it. We've got it. Go ahead.
What's cool about base jumping too is nobody gets to escape the fear,
Mm-mm.
right? Like you get to see your friends fully exposed for what they are. There's no hiding. You're naked up there,
Yeah.
and it's cool to see that. It's cool to see somebody that you've looked up to, and you're like, man, nothing can shake this guy. But when you're standing on the edge of a cliff or the end edge of a bridge or whatever you're jumping off of, that fear comes out, and
Yeah.
there's no hiding it, and it's pretty cool to see that for sure, and it's cool to see it in yourself.
Yeah.
It's cool to see what comes out of you.
Mm-hmm.
You say some pretty funny things
That's like
in that
some
moment.
quite interesting words I can imagine comes out, but it is interesting. I think vulnerability at that moment is pretty huge. Just going, listen, even at the time where fear makes us feel like you were saying naked. A lot of people equate the being naked, and fear and having that vulnerability as a bad thing. I think we have the
It's not.
capacity to be able to utilize vulnerability as strength. And I mean, goodness, I mean, we can take that into relationships, we can take that into friendships and parenting, into just everything. Having a little bit more vulnerability has the opportunity to really create this amazing experience, right? And so
Yep.
I think a lot of, I mean, there's so many cool takeaways just from that type of scenario of finding the joy, being able to be vulnerable, having the support network. I think during these times right now, I think it's really important to have all of those. I mean, we're in this kind of unprecedented, we talked a little bit before, this unprecedented time of a lot of being in the void. And
Sure.
the void is kind of one of those just really freaky things. And I remember the one time I did this crazy little experiment where we were doing a lot of kind of Navy SEAL-esque drills, and middle of the night we're in the Pacific Ocean, and it was one of those things where they sent us out there, and wasn't really a real directive to it, but we just had to swim out there, and they said, hey, listen, you'll know when we tell you to come back, just kind of stay in there. And it's one of those things where I didn't even think twice about it. I had my crew of guys that I knew would literally do anything for me, and I would do anything for them. And we're going out into the Pacific Ocean, and it didn't even dawn on me until I got still, and we're just sitting there kind of floating, and I look up, and the stars are unbelievable. It's just absolute beauty, and you're feeling the ocean. And then the thought was like, wait a minute, there's sharks that are swimming underneath my feet, man. And so it was funny. It was the fear of that was just very, very minute for a minute, and then all of a sudden I was like, I can let that cripple me, or I can actually just simply sit back and enjoy just being in that void. And then that moment
Sure.
where it's like, what, I need to soak in this moment of not knowing when I can go back on the shore, or when I can,
What have I gotten myself
what have I
into?
gotten myself into? And so it's really interesting.
I've
Is
said that a few times in my life.
I can imagine. I can imagine. And so it's interesting. There's a lot of times, and right now we're all dealing with this weird void, and it's one of those things like, how willing are we to kind of just stay in that void and experience what possibly could be really, really beautiful. And I would imagine many a times when you had those, what did I just get myself into kind of experience. Then all of a sudden, you did the jump, and then all of a sudden you're like, that was the coolest thing I've ever done in my life. And so there's a lot of takeaways from that particular scenario where, listen, just be vulnerable, have a little bit of, joy in the moment. But at the same time, you just got to jump, man, and you got to be able to just, commit to whatever you're about to do. And I would imagine if a lot of the hesitation, if we jumped and had that hesitation, that's when a lot of trouble starts to come into play. Is if we did have that hesitation, just that one moment of decision going, I'm going to do this, and then really making those steps forward to be able to accomplish my end game. So I have
this situation. This situation is obviously a little different, right? Like all the base jumping and the skydiving and all those things that I've done, that was by choice. And now, as the entire world, we've been thrust into the situation together, and we don't have a say so in what's happening.
Yeah, yeah, and that is one of those, once again, kind of the external variables that we go, man, that was unexpected, right? We don't know when, we'll never kind of get back to what used to be. There's going to be, this kind of weird new normal. And I think that's actually kind of cool, is, discovering that new normal, but being able to handle well those external variables, right? And so those times where, you put all the planning in and you're making all the proper steps, but then something comes along the way and kind of blows you off course a little bit. And you're like, wait a minute, how am I going to adjust my sails to kind of use and harness this as a strength, right? And so that's that's one of those things where I think, using those type of analogies from what you're doing to the time we're in now, that's very different. We can control the elements, but we can control the variables. But those moments when we didn't expect that, and then how do we adjust? How do we reframe what's going on? And so I think there's a really cool opportunity then during this time to help everyone just reframe the context of where we're at right now, and it's okay to be in the void for a while, because there's a lot of beauty behind it. I've got to ask, he made some really cool transitions in the career, and how in the world did we get to the point where we were doing some stunt stuff with the CSIs and the units and Ant-Man, Iron Man 3, and how did we make that transition? Talk to me a little bit about that. And to me, that's pretty cool. I mean, obviously my boys think it's like the coolest thing ever, but how do we make that transition?
Yeah, right place at the right time, man. I got lucky. I was actually in Paris Valley, California, for a skydiving event, for trying out for a world record, and met a guy named Tim that works in the industry. He's a he's a stunt coordinator, professional stuntman. His resume is ridiculous, and we just started talking. We just struck up a conversation, and having normal conversation. He asked what I did. At the time, I worked at Nuttall in Arizona, and I asked what he did. He said, well, I work in the industry, and I didn't really know what that meant. And I said, well, that's cool. And then a little bit later, he said, there's been times where I could have really used you particularly for some stunt work in skydiving. And disclosure, there's not a whole lot of people of color in skydiving.
Okay.
There's certainly more now,
right,
but there weren't as many then. And I said, yeah, man, I'm down. That sounds like fun.
Yeah.
We exchanged numbers, and about 2 weeks later, I got a phone call from him, and he said, hey, this is Tim. Do you remember me? And I said, yeah. And he said, hey, I got this gig for you if you want to come out to California. It's really easy. It's just two of us jumping as military guys. And that's where it started. And then once you've done something in the industry, people kind of remember, and if you're needed again, your name comes up.
Yeah.
My highlight in the stunt world, I had a guy call me. This was for the Will Smith thing, I think, that you talked about earlier. Doubling Will Smith for the Kids' Choice Awards. And this guy called me up, and he said, hey, he introduced himself and said, hey, I just want you to know that I've called 3 different people asking who can double Will Smith, and all 3 of them gave me your name. I was like, yes. That was my moment where I was like, I am in, man. I am so in.
That is...
And just like my skydiving teams, every time I'm on a gig, I feel like, I'm the lowest guy on the totem pole. I'm the least talented person in the pool. So it's certainly been such a cool experience to get to do those things. The movie world is fun, man. It's really cool, and I've got to meet, some really interesting and unique people, and the money's pretty good too.
Yeah.
So
that never hurts. Yes, never.
It doesn't hurt at all. People are like, how come you just don't do that for a living? I'm like, well, it's not like you get to call them and say, hey, I'm ready to do this gig. It's few and far between.
I've got an idea for a movie that I'm going to do. Right.
I think I should be one.
Definitely. Yeah. As a matter of fact, yes, I'm going to be the next MIB. Yeah, that's funny. Yeah. Well, I mean,
one of the recent stunts we did, we were jumping out of a C-130 off the coast of San Diego into the ocean, and it's like 12 miles off the ocean, which is something you never do that.
Right.
And we were following a 30-foot boat that's getting pulled off the tailgate of the C-130, and we're jumping out after it. And I remember looking at my buddies, and I was like, man, I know this is just a normal jump for us, but I am freaking out right now. And that was a really cool experience. And there's been some really fun stuff that I've done, but I could talk about the stunts for forever.
Oh, no doubt.
Cool stuff.
Yeah, I can imagine. We can spend an entire hour talking about those different things, and I think that's really cool. I mean, that also speaks to just when preparation meets opportunity, right? And so, by simply just getting that call, being able to be prepared enough to go, yeah, let's jump into that opportunity. And, there was a lot of work that went into just being able to get that phone call, and the evolution of an entire career. It's kind of funny as everyone sees, you're a world record holder, you're one of the best in the world, and you got all these gold medals, you're being able to be on movies, and and not schlep movies, like really cool movies. Everyone sees that, but no one sees the 28 years that have gone into those type of moments, and and it speaks to being able to be patient for those particular opportunities, and to be able to pursue a little bit of the the steps in between. It's one of those things where you said at the beginning, is like, I never really did that to do a world record or be in a movie. It was one of those things where you pursued a passion and pursued this innate drive or draw.
Took advantage of the opportunity.
No doubt.
Took advantage of the opportunity.
No doubt.
And it's not like you get into it going, man, I want to be a stunt skydiver. It just there's opportunities that present themselves, and you take advantage of it. You go for it. And I've been lucky, man. I've been super fortunate. And your show talks about the peaks and the valleys and stuff, and I have gratitude for my valleys. I've got really good problems. I've never known what it's like to go hungry. I've always been showered with love. I consider myself extremely privileged. Mm-hmm. And you see people that are in real struggles with whether it's health issues or living in an oppressed country or whatever, and you go, man, those are real valleys. Mm-hmm. So, man, my valleys and probably your valleys are pretty tame in comparison to a lot of people. So you have to put things in perspective.
No, you for sure do. I mean, a lot of times, and I get to travel a lot with my occupation as well, and it's you see some pretty oppressed countries, or you see some pretty oppressed people and some valleys that people are in, and you're like, man, I never have an opportunity to complain. I have food.
That's real problems.
Yeah, those are real issues.
Real world problems.
With, and that's one of those things where we have the capacity to help those individuals as well. And when you see them and be able to expose yourself to those scenarios, you go. Once again, you have a choice. You can go, all right, I'm going to turn a blind eye, and I like my life, or I'm going to use my platform for influence, much like yourself is going. Okay, let me breathe some life into some arenas or some areas, and or people that need to, need our help. And more time than not is now, is we have the opportunity to really breathe some life into people that are really struggling, people losing their jobs, people are really kind of in that freak out moment. So we're going to wrap up, but what are some of your thoughts on being able to breathe that type of life into people? What are some of those things that when you're setting your head down, some of those inspirations in the mind that kind of come to the front surface and go, okay, I know I'm doing the right thing. How can I make an influence on people right now? Because you've taken the expanse of your entire career, and you're coaching people, you're teaching people, you're breathing life into people. So what are some of those things that when you set your head down, kind of be able to just go, I need to, I want to inspire some people?
Yeah, I think you need to respect, first of all, where they're coming from, and show some compassion to those that are struggling, and understand where they're coming from. You never know what people are going through, and I think this all the time when I run into strangers and someone's, being rude, or someone's, just not being a good human being. And then I take a step back and I'm like, man, I have no idea what that person is dealing with right now, and try to just be as influential to my friends and my loved ones and my family as I can. And when I see that they're struggling, try to be there for them and with them. And, sometimes it's just listening to what they have to say, and being compassionate to that. And,
I think that definitely speaks to, one of those massive pieces about, who you are and your character. And, I appreciate you taking the time just to kind of breathe some life into us. And like I said, we can spend a whole nother hour talking about all kinds of different nuances in the skydiving world and in your career. But I just want to thank you, Mickey. To me, you're an absolute true champion, not only in what you do, but just true champion in life. And your character just speaks and just oozes goodness. And so you've breathed a lot of inspiration into me, into my boys, and into the family. And so I want to tip the hat to you for just really being a true champion and true just being awesome, just being you. So appreciate you taking the time to be on this. Everyone listening, I appreciate you guys, being on our live Facebook, but also the podcast. And Mickey, how can people follow you? You on the Instagram, you on the Facebook? Where are we?
I'm on Instagram. I'm on Facebook. I'm not doing anything that I'm trying to promote or anything like that. But Damon, thank you for having me on, man. It's truly an honor. Like I said, we come from a family of overachievers, and you're certainly one of those. You and your brother and your mom and dad are just phenomenal people. My brothers are just outstanding citizens, and you told me about your lineup, coming up, and I'm like, what am I doing on your show, dude?
Nah.
So I'm honored. Thank you for having me on. I really like what you're doing. It's a good message, especially right now. It's a message that people need to hear right now. And it's good stuff, man. Thank you.
I appreciate it. All right, guys, we're going to wrap up, but know that, we appreciate you guys. And listen, this is a weird void right now that we're in, and, hopefully this can breathe a little bit of life into you as well. But listen, man, just stay in that void, but also take time to step back a little bit and be able to enjoy that beauty, and, have the people that are around you to inspire you. And don't be afraid to reach out to people that need our inspiration as well. Families, friends. Yeah. I mean, everyone, this is a really cool time to be able to reach out to people that are struggling, maybe possibly hurting. And so, that's what this is, format is all about, is like, listen, all of us are just in this together. We need to link arms. We may not know the story of the person to our right and our left, but we know we're in the same fight together. And so we're
in this together, man.
We're in it, man. We're in it together. We're in the same cause, and link arms and just breathe a little life into that person next to you and tell them to always keep moving forward. And that's what we're talking about, just being always in that forever forward mindset. I appreciate you guys. Hope you have a blessed night. Thank you so much, Mickey. Have an awesome night, and love you, bud.
Love you too, man. Thank you very much, Damon.
See you guys.
Yeah. See ya.